It's 23 to 9. One thing I want to check closely in those crime statistics is drug crime, because I'm getting increasing messages about the ice epidemic, which just continue to frustrate me. The federal government strategy signed off by the states doesn't even mention ice, but police tell me it's an epidemic. The health workers tell me it's an epidemic. The AMBOs tell me it's an epidemic. Dangerous one. The seizures of ice, methamphetamine, at the docks are huge. In regional Victoria, towns are being destroyed. There is ice around the school system. Several principals have told us that. I've even heard of ice dealers targeting kids. So a child might be suspended for playing up in class, and when he's not at school, the ice dealer approaches him and sells him drugs. There's been real trouble getting action on this, but an important step today. The state opposition has become the first party I'm aware of to actually produce a policy on ice. And look, believe me, this potentially reaches into every Victorian household. It's the biggest drug issue to face Victoria, and I hope this galvanises other parties and the government for that matter, so we get policies on this. To ignore it's just wrong. Opposition Leader Daniel Andrews, good morning.
Good morning, Neil.
Now, you've drawn up a list of, you want to introduce new offences. What are they?
We want to fundamentally acknowledge, Neil, and I think the best thing is to quote Graham Ashton, someone who's a straight talker and has spent a lifetime working in Victoria Police, and he says, "It's clear that an entire generation of rural youth is at risk, threatening the future prosperity of those communities." And I think you can say the same for the suburbs of Melbourne as well. I think leadership's about the will to act, but it's also about having the character to admit when something has got away from you. And I think this has got away from all of us. And we need to do some important things, but we also need to acknowledge, Neil, that we don't have all the answers, and this is going to be a long road, and there's going to be a lot more work to do.
That's an important point. You think it's got away from us?
I think it absolutely has.
The police have said to me we were caught napping. You think that's right?
Well, I don't want to be so much attributing blame. I think that you've got to stand up and have the courage to say, look, we don't have the answers on this. It has got away from us, and there's a lot of catch-up to be done here. And I think that Ken Lay, doctors, nurses, medical researchers, people in the drug and alcohol sector, people in the youth sector are very keen to get on and do that catch-up work. They just need a government that's prepared to support them.
Well, just before we get into exactly what you want to do,
sure.
What's the potential here, do you think? If we don't address this, how significant is it?
Well, if you talk to nurses, you talk to paramedics, talk to police. I talk to mates in my old hometown up in Wang, where this is a real issue. And, you are convinced that this has got away from us. If you also talk to others and hear stories about mums losing their kids, so they're in no fit state to care for their children. People who were loving parents who just can't do that anymore because of what this poison, what this terrible, evil drug has done to them. We know about the violence. We know about people who are there to care for us being assaulted and bashed. We know also about the fact that this drug is so addictive, and it gets a hold of people. It basically diminishes your capacity to feel normal.
So you believe it is one of the biggest drug issues we've faced?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And what we need to do is take action, but also acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. And I know that forums that have been run, you've done one, I know there's been others run across the state. Those who treat those who are addicted to drugs, those who provide care and support, they're the first ones to say, we don't have all the answers. The pharmacotherapy, if you like, or the science of how you treat people who are addicted to ice is still a evolving thing. We don't have all the answers on this, but we've got to have the courage to say we've let this get away from us. Now we have to act, and we have to have the determination. Now I just would say one other thing before we go through some of the stuff that I want to do.
Yep.
If we win the election. I don't think there's any coincidence that we've got skyrocketing youth unemployment, a TAFE system that's on its knees, and young people, particularly in regional Victoria, who are falling victim to this. I think there is a broader issue here. This is not just about law and order, as important as that is. It's also about a range of other issues.
Okay, so what do you want to? What are the new offences you're looking at?
So the new offences, and these will carry between 20 and 25 years.
25 years jail?
Yes, I think this is absolutely important to send the clearest possible message. So firstly, a new offence of publishing or possessing instructions for the production of a prohibited drug. So under Labor, publishing or possessing instructions for producing crystal methamphetamine or ice will be a new and specific offence. So the person who's got the recipe book, the person who's helping others to make this via writing and circulating the recipe book, they're a big part of the problem, and there's an offence to capture them.
Okay. Yep.
The second one and I note the point you made about this getting into schools, and we get anecdotal evidence of that. The people I've talked to are very concerned about this evil drug being pushed in schools and near to schools. So there's going to be a specific offence of trafficking a prohibited drug to school students. That's one, and then trafficking near a school. These are two separate offences, and they'll carry that 20 to 25 year penalty.
So if you're caught selling ice to a student,
That's
a school,
right.
or a secondary school student, not a tertiary, but a primary or secondary school student, you get 25 years.
Up to. Now, obviously, the courts obviously have to then judge every case on its merits, and I think that's the appropriate way to go. But this is a new offence to send the clearest possible message that if you get caught pushing this in schools to kids, then you will feel the full force of the law, and there will be a very significant penalty for you. We're going to also introduce an offence where, say, a landlord turns a blind eye to the fact that a clandestine lab is being run out of a premise that they rent to someone, or a nightclub owner, for instance, knows that this stuff's being dealt in their premises and turns a blind eye to it. We're going to send the very strongest message to them too. If you know about this, you are part of the problem unless you stand up.
And that carried 25 years as well?
Up to 25 years.
So a nightclub owner, if there's stuff's being sold in his club and he's got reason to know that, could do 25 years jail?
The maximum penalty would be 25 years. And again, every case would be judged on its merits. But again, we can't have a situation where people who know this is being pushed in their venue, or know that it's being manufactured in a premises that they own and have rented out, and they had reasonable belief, then we can't excuse them turning a blind eye to it. If you're going to stop this in its tracks, then you've got to get to the source.
Okay.
The other one, which I think is very important, is a new offence, Neil, that combines violence and threats of violence with trafficking ice. So we hear some stories, and I know you have too. These are desperately sad stories of people who are fundamentally addicted to this highly addictive drug. They owe debts, for instance, to their dealer. Their dealer then stands over them and recruits them under duress with threats of violence or actual violence into becoming a dealer themselves. So just like we have offences, for instance, Neil, where if it's theft and violence, then it's robbery. If it's trespassing and intent to steal or assault, it becomes burglary. We want essentially an aggravated drug offence. So if there's violence and trafficking, then you would get not just the trafficking offence, but there would be this aggravated trafficking. Because can there be anything worse than someone who you've got in your clutches, they've become an addict because of the product you've pushed to them, and this is highly addictive, and then you stand over them to recruit them to push it to others. Again, these offences, whether you're printing the recipe book or whether you're turning a blind eye to the manufacture or the sale of this particular drug, or whether you're into schools with it, or if you're using standover tactics, all these people are part of the problem, and they need to get the most significant message that we will not tolerate this.
And potential, the maximum penalty, 25 years, that's for publishing or possessing the instructions on how to make the stuff, trafficking to school kids or near a school, permitting the sale of it, perhaps in a nightclub or something, or the lab in a flat, and trafficking with violence and threats, all carrying 25 years. They're the new offences. Now, what else are you doing?
Now, I think back to the point I made before, that no one's got all the answers on this. So what I want to do, as one of the first acts of a new Labor government, is to set up an ICE task force. It'll report back within 100 days. I'm not interested in talk fests. I'm not interested in things that drag on for years. We need an action plan. We need an intervention on this. And we need a plan that comes from sitting down with the Chief Commissioner, with the doctors, the nurses, the emergency services, drug experts, also the courts, including the drug court, to sit down with the Premier, with the Attorney General, with the Police Minister, the Health Minister, the Youth Affairs Minister. So a small group, but a group of experts to develop that plan. And it will be a long road, be no doubt about that. This is not going to be some magic wand thing where it's fixed in a week or a day.
And this is a plan beyond the
beyond what I've announced today, yes.
Yeah, right.
And I've got a couple more things to go through. And again, I want to stress. I know you and I have discussed many times, and I know that you're not into talk fest. I'm not either. But we have to admit that we don't have all the answers on this. We have to admit that it's got away from us. There's a bit of courage in that. Not often do politicians stand up and say, I don't have all the answers. But on this, I don't think anyone does. So let's have that task force of experts, those who are at the coalface, real people confronting this in real situations every day, and then let's work out the plan, and then let's waste no time in implementing that plan. So 100 days.
Okay, yes.
Right.
And the new offences you'd introduce immediately.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And again, these are first steps. We may go further. The expert advice may be that there are other deficiencies in the law.
Yes.
The other thing I want to do, Neil, is make sure that we don't tell particularly country communities what to do. We're not telling country communities how to solve a problem that's in their local community. So there'll be a grant program, $500,000, to support a lot of the amazing work that's going on across regional Victoria now. I know that the Geelong community, Our Town's Ice Fight, they're calling it, they're raising significant funding for local solutions, local campaigns, if you like, things that can work with that local twist, if you like.
Yep.
That local knowledge is invaluable. And we've got to include that, not shut it out. We have to listen to local communities and make sure that they've got a stake in this. And these grants, albeit small grants, will go a long way to making sure that regional communities have a direct say.
So is that a total of $500,000?
That's a total of $500,000.
Okay. Right.
For instance, I think the Geelong fundraising target is they want to get to 100, and they're almost there. So a lot can be done with that amount of money. Now, the final thing I wanted to say, Neil, two further things quickly. We know that Victoria Police Resources will be a significant part of this. The first, and what I can announce today, is that we will provide $15 million for additional drug buses so that Ken Lay gets the fleet that he needs.
Yes.
This will be a combination of upgrading an ageing fleet now, but also buying additional drug buses, small and large, particularly the small ones for regional areas. And that'll mean that the total drug testing that Ken Lay and his police force can do will be increased. This thing stays in your system between 4 and 24 hours. We know that 1 in 10 people who are being tested at drug buses are returning a positive reading.
Yes.
This is a very sound investment.
So $15 million for drug buses.
That's exactly right. And the final thing that I think is critically important is we need a community education campaign on this, and not just the usual ad campaign that doesn't have a great deal of effect. We need to recruit some community heroes to stand up and say, this is an evil drug, it will get a hold of you and it will ruin your life, as well as ruining the lives of those who love you and the people that you love. So my idea on this, let's take some of this Moving Victoria money, those Liberal Party ads that are on the TV and every other media outlet, and put that into a proper community education campaign. I'd want to sit down with Gillan McLachlan and talk about getting some AFL legends and heroes. I'd want to sit down and talk to soccer, cricket. Why wouldn't we sit down with a bloke like Ben Roberts-Smith and say, will you put your name to this? Will you send the strongest possible message as someone who's respected and admired by all of us?
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Someone that I know you've had a lot to do with, Neil. Why wouldn't we go to a person like that and say, will you stand with us against this evil drug?
Okay. Is there any chance of making this bipartisan?
Well, that'll be entirely a matter for the Premier. I don't know that necessarily this needs to be an issue that's a big debating point in the election, and perhaps the most mature politics would be if everybody agreed to this, and no matter who won the election, we could have an action plan, and we could have an admission, an absolute admission, Neil, from all sides of politics that this has got away from us.
Okay, well, I agree with that, and I'll pursue the government on that. One area that I keep getting messages through is rehab. There's not enough rehab available.
Now, to their credit, there was some money in this year's state budget, and as I understand it, that should be able to provide treatment for about 2,000 people. That's an extra 2,000 people. That's a great spend. That's, in fact, a significant investment. I'm not sure whether all of that's been unpacked, but again, part of getting the experts around a table, and in good time, 100 days, putting together a plan will be rehab, treatment, research, community education, law enforcement, sentencing, all of these issues beyond what I've announced today in specific terms. This is what we need. We can't ignore this any longer, and we can't pretend that things are going great. They're not. Graham Ashton's got this right. A generation of young people are at risk. I think there are TAFE and unemployment issues as well, but a generation of young people are at risk, and it's just too important for us to ignore or pretend that it's anything other than something that has fundamentally got away from us.
We'll take some views on this in a moment. 96900 693 13 13 32. I'll pursue the government. I think it's the sort of issue that's big enough it should be bipartisan. We'll give it a try.
Talking Melbourne.